Hey guys, I'm Nick,
I'm Mike.
and today we're going to be going over bump steer. It's probably what we get questions about more than anything else. We're not going to get in the weeds on it. We're just going to go over do's, don'ts, and misconceptions. So I'll let Mike take it from here.
All right. So this front end is from roughly a 68, 69 Camaro. I'm going to go through a little bit on the basic alignment that I've got going on here already, and then we'll get right into the bump steer setup. Again, we've got a 69 Camaro frame here. This will go along with most every GM AA arm car out there. So we're going to talk the early Novas, early Camaros, all the A-bike cars, all the G-bike cars.
S10s.
S10s. I've gone ahead, I've set this up at 7 degrees of positive caster. I've set the wheel camber to 0.
Which about this time people give us a phone call and they ask the magic question, what should the angle of my tie rod be? Which varies based on your ride height.
Absolutely. Ride height has a lot to do with where your bump steer is going to be. So we're going to go over why that everyone thinks that you're supposed to have the tie rod set to level when you're at ride height. That's going to be incorrect. I'm going to show you that here.
All right, guys, so Mike's going to give us a brief synopsis of what bump steer actually is and what's wrong with what you see here on the frame.
All right. Like you said, bump steer is basically when the wheels are turning when the driver isn't putting a steering wheel input in. So as you go through travel, the wheels might toe out, they might toe in. Toe out is way worse than toe in. So we're going to mainly focus on that right now since we're not getting super particular in all this. So as you can see here, this tie rod is set up relatively level. I can't really get it there. We're close enough. This thing's sitting at ride height. What we're going to call ride height is roughly an inch to inch and a half of shock shaft showing. You can't really go much lower than that. So this is going to get a good amount of travel that we get to set this up for. If you watch this here, you can see as we go up, you don't have much change in steering. But as we go down, it gets really drastic on a toe in. It's not the end of the world like this, but we can remedy this. I'm going to switch this up. I'm going to go to the next thing that most people say. After a lot of people get past it doesn't need to be level, we get a lot of people that want this set up all the way up against the tie rod. So I'm going to set that up. I'm going to realign it real quick. We'll go through that travel at that point. All right. So now I've moved this to the far extreme of where we were before. Last time we had it set up pretty level. That you could see was way too low in relation to the steering arm. Moving it all the way up, I'm going to show you what happens if you're wrong in the other direction. So now you can see it still doesn't move a whole lot when you lift it up. But from ride height down, you can see now we have a toe out condition. This is really bad. This is what gets a lot of people in trouble. So moving on from here, we're going to show you roughly where you need to go, which is obviously somewhere in between, but how to make sure that you get it in a position that doesn't get you in trouble on the racetrack.
All right, to Mike's point, with the tow-in situation, the worst thing you can do is scrub some speed. But when the vehicle's towing out, it's trying to drive two different directions without any driver input. Best case scenario, you tear up some parts. Worst case scenario, you put it in the wall. So from this point forward, Mike's going to try to give you a good idea or explanation as far as how to put the tie rod in an ideal spot to get through a safe weekend of racing.
All right, like Nick said, you can get yourself in a bad position if your bump steer's out of shape. I'm going to show you now how to get it in a normal position. We went over what a lot of people think where the tie rod needs to be level. That one's wrong. A lot of other people end up with this all the way up. That's also wrong. I'm going to set it up in a position in between. We're going to go from there. To start out, again, we've got this at 1 inch to inch and a half of shock shaft showing. We have to run it through its travel to make sure that we've got a decent bump steer all the way through. A big part of that is we also have to check it under compression. I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to reset this up. We'll do this one more time. All right, now I've got this at what I figured out is pretty much a sort of ideal position. Now we're running through its travel. I'm going to show you what it does when it's close. You're still going to see a little bit of toe change. The AA arm cars is very difficult to get this perfect. I'm not saying you can't get it better than this, but this will work well. One of the considerations is if you have a rack, the rack height absolutely matters for this. I can't change that on this, so we're going to deal with it for now. If you still have stock steering, there's not much you can do with that, so you have to work within the limitations you have. I'm going to run through this travel. I'm going to show you where it's at. So again, from ride height coming up, it still stays pretty good. So that means that on compression side, we're not going to get ourselves into trouble. As you go through travel, all the extension, you'll see all it really does is it toes in slightly. So we end up a little bit towed in, I would guess about 1/4 of an inch, maybe a little bit less than that. That we're going to call good, especially if you're at the racetrack. All right, so I've shown you what happens if you've got the tie rod mounted too low. You can see it toes in a lot. If you set the tie rod too high, we see it toes out. That's the condition we're trying to stay away from. This spot, we're roughly in the middle. If you want to get there a little quicker, what you really need to do is take your inner pivot and your tie rod end, take that angle, compare it with the inner A-arm pivot and the ball joint pivot. Those two lines should be relatively parallel. Get yourself there to start, adjust a little bit from there to get it where you want it to be.
And to build on what Mike said, rack mounting plays a crucial role in the amount of bump steer you do or don't have when you go to align these things. Too low, too far forward, or too far backwards, depending on the chassis. Also, keep in mind, these are built 50 to 60 years ago, mostly by people that got high and drunk on their lunch break, if we're being honest. So they're not going to be the same from side to side. You may need a different amount of shim on the driver's side versus the passenger side. Other than that, I think we covered all our bases. If you have any questions on this or anything else, give us a call, 407-933-7385. Sales@TRZmotorsports.com for an email. Send us a message on Facebook or Instagram. We're happy to answer any question you guys might have.